Welcome to Get Big Out Loud Radio, where we explore living the complex, funny, and beautiful ride of life with me, Kari Knutson, and Dr. Pat on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Are your thoughts keeping you small? Are you ready to get big? I will offer you ideas to transform what you are thinking into conscious action. Explore what is keeping you small and how to shift your behaviors in order to get big. Learn what is possible for you. Get ready to get big and live life out loud starting now.
Hey everybody, welcome. I'm opening this up for my buddy, my friend, my colleague. Take this ride, this beautiful ride of life with. I get to do this show with her. I do. I'm so happy that I do. Get Big Out Loud. It's Kari Knutson does this show. It is off the charts. I actually think that what Kari should do is go back to every episode we have done and create almost like a digital book from them. They're so educational, they're so informative, and they're so fun. I was actually went back because we're doing some upgrades to our YouTube, and I'm looking at all the shows that people have done. And out of all the shows I've done, there are a couple that float to the top where I'm smiling most of the time. And then we're laughing about some ridiculous benign thing that has nothing to do with the episode per se. But this is what I love. It is a more than powerful conversation. Today, it's about building resilience during difficult times. I'm so looking forward to this show with Kari because one of the things that, we do is we do have fun. But we also look at ourselves and we kind of have a little fun at ourselves sometimes. I know today I got a little fun things about myself, that I got to talk about. But we've got a great show. This is for you all out there. Kari is more than the show. And you're going to be really cool when she gets back out there and does her one woman show, right? But she is a speaker, Get Big Out Loud. She is somebody that's consulting, she's counseling, she lives what she talks about, but she's also an emotional intelligence expert. And what that means is what we need now. It's known as EQ. And during the acceptance speech last night at the Critics' Choice Awards, Betty, I don't know if you can get Halle Berry's acceptance speech that we can play during the break. But Halle Berry and her acceptance speech for something we're going to talk about in another show, but her acceptance speech for being out there, for saying, see me, she literally could have been calling Kari Knutson out when she talked about women need to have the emotional intelligence. She said those two words. Emotional intelligence. And I bet half the room didn't know what she was talking about, but we do because we're taking the ride today. Kari, great to have you. Like, this is your show. But man, I was thinking of you last night when I was watching Halle Berry, just an exquisite acceptance speech for her award. And blah, 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 blah. We need to do this. This is what we do. And women have emotional intelligence. And I thought, oh, okay. Kari Knutson.
Oh, I love it. I'll have to look it up. It's great. EQ's getting mainstream attention. That's awesome. Thanks, Halle Berry.
Yeah. Oh, but today, let's talk about this here because I love the topic of building resilience. And what I love about it is a lot of times we get so far down a couple of courts that we don't even know we've tapped into our resilience quotient. And can you talk about what resilience means from your perspective? And then you're going to share some ideas with us. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Today's all about building resilience in difficult times because it feels like there's a lot of difficult things going on right now, globally, locally, nationally, personally. There's just a lot. And I felt like this month we should talk about building resilience to help get us through those difficult times. And resilience, like you said, what is resilience? It is simply your capacity to recover from difficulties. And it's not your capacity to recover quickly. It's not your capacity to recover in the same way as someone else or in the same timeline or in an exact certain way. It is your innate capacity that you build because we're all individuals and we're all unique. And sometimes you go through life and something that you see someone else struggle with, you don't struggle with as much. And something else you see someone just go through, you're like, why am I still struggling with this? Right. So you cannot compare yourself when building your resilience. Also, resilience is a trait that everyone has resilience, and you can learn about it, grow it, cultivate it. So it's not like luck of the draw. I guess I didn't get any resilience, right? It's everybody has the capacity. And so you can learn about it and cultivate it. And the idea is, can you build your capacity first through your thoughts, and then in your behaviors and your actions? Can you build that capacity? And that's really what resilience is. And who doesn't need more of that right now? Right? How do we do that when we're faced with so much? So that's what resilience is. And today we're going to talk about some ideas for building that capacity, and some like really tangible tools that you could use today to start thinking about that.
And, I mean, a lot of times, Kari, can we talk about something that I think is a misconception, but is really important? A lot of times I want to break apart building resilience and during difficult times. One of the hardest things and for us to recognize today is that there has been, I'm getting all choked up. I haven't even said it yet. There has been a process that has been going on. And I listen to a lot of spiritual things, but I listen to a couple of really, like positive spiritual people. One of them is a husband and wife team, and he's never wavered. They shut his gigantic, he does his deal in the Compact Center in Houston, right? Like the football place, or right. And when you listen to somebody shut down like the Doors, and you listen to people never waver, here's the thing I want to ask you about, because self-awareness is something you teach people. Just because people go away, just because certain things stop, just because people come and go, and there's been a lot of people going. And I don't mean in death, of course, death. And I got to take a moment. I don't even know what to say about Ukraine anymore. You want to talk about difficult times, and you want to talk about resilience? Wow. Wow. We did a show last week on the women of the Ukraine. But sometimes when things leave, we see it as not good, but the doors are opening up for us to bring something else. What is your experience to what the greatest things we should know about building resilience? What should we know? What are your top ideas?
Well, the first one is the idea about self-awareness is the cornerstone for anything. And like the idea of wisdom, how we know ourselves and how we become self-aware. It's not just like saying, I want to be aware. It creates you have to have some intentionality and some consciousness to what you're doing. And what happens is, in the face of trying to build our capacity to manage things, sometimes what we do is we're so much on autopilot that we don't think about what input is coming in and then how it's affecting us. So specifically, like when you think about the news, and right now, it's when you look at the Ukraine, and I feel like you could see the war on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer, on your TV. You can get updates by the minute. It is right here. And it's so devastating to see that. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And so if you are constantly though checking and looking at the news, you don't realize what happens is you're triggering your brain for that anxiety state and the what's next state and am I safe state. And also I'm so sad state. It's all those triggers that happen to us. And our brain kind of gets hooked on those things. So we get hooked on feeling anxious all the time. We get hooked on being overwhelmed. We get hooked on feeling depressed about it. And while it still exists in that place, you have to say to yourself, this is true. And at the same time, how much can I take in at any given time? And is me setting some boundaries around my self-awareness actually going to be helpful for me to build my capacity to be resilient? Do I need to be triggered all day long and hooked to those feelings? Or if I use my self-awareness to say, I really want to be informed about what's going on, so I'm going to make a conscious decision when and how I check the news, and be in a headspace to do that in a way that isn't constant. And just because we have access to constant news and information doesn't mean we should take that access. And that's a huge thing for people right now as part of building your self-awareness. That is really important to build resiliency, because being on autopilot, being constantly triggered, and it almost is like the phone is there, so you check it, and the feed is there, and there's always something new. And it's that little hit that your brain gets of like, what's new? What did I miss? What's happening now? And you have to be able to limit that access, because your brain just cannot handle it. And so that's a part of a conscious way of thinking. How am I taking in my news or social media information? When am I doing that? A lot of times too, it's hard to build resilience when you're exhausted,
Oh,
and just feeling tired is this, it's, and people can take it for granted, but have you ever had like been going through something tough, and then you finally get a good night's sleep, and you wake up and you're like, okay,
yeah,
all right, I can handle this,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
sleep
yeah.
is huge in terms of that. And if you're going to bed at night and you're watching the news or scrolling into the last minute, your eyes are closed and your brain's still processing that, or you're not sleeping well, or thinking about, okay, what's my sleep routine? How do
Yeah.
I prepare my brain to shut down at night and process things? So that's a huge thing too. How do
Mhm.
you sleep and let yourself do that without, again, having the triggers from the day go with you into the night?
It's so interesting we're talking about this because I just went through this experience myself over the weekend. And, I don't think about what you just said, and I need to.
Well, there it is.
No, there's no mistake.
Success.
No mistake. But, I knew we were doing this show and I must have subconsciously really done some reprogramming for myself. I went out and I was playing on Saturday and I'm good to go for like 6 hours. I really am. And I couldn't. And I don't know if it was the reaction to playing without the mask, because that was a thing here in our state. We got like the masks removed.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to, but that thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
But I found myself like Howard's 85. And it's like 1 o'clock, and Howard says to me, "Hey, do you want to play?" And I'm like, "No," I'm like exhausted. So it was an indicator to me of all those things you've just said. Now, we have to figure out, which is it? Is it the news? Is it something that weighs heavy on us? Is it what we're taking in food wise? Is it not sleeping? But you just gave us a blueprint that if we did nothing else but those three things, we can make a major shift, right? Major.
Yes, major, especially if it's just engaging your conscious mind to think a little differently. Again, not with judgment, like, I can't believe I did this or whatever, because that's what we go to. We get judgy about ourselves, or we kind of like our habits take over our thoughtfulness. And part of it is just looking at yourself with curiosity and compassion, and saying like, what would it be like if I tried this? I'm curious what this would look like. I wonder if I put some limits on myself, or set up like, I'm going to check the news at this time and this time, or my sleep schedule is going to look like this, or I'm going to actively process my emotions instead of taking things in and then having nowhere to go with it. I'm going to figure out how to process them. And that's another thing I want to talk about, is that kind of next step. But for the first level, it's just bringing consciousness to how you're living your life, how you're taking in information. When you feel tired, and you don't have the capacity, you could feel physically tired, you could feel mentally or emotionally tired, right? Like you can feel like it's just too much. So, and this is what I also say about this. A lot of times we feel like our suffering will somehow lead to better outcomes, either for us or other people. Like if we suffer enough, something good will come of it. Like we'll get an award or parade, or someone will see how much we're suffering, or whatever it's going to be. And the truth is, your suffering does not lead to better outcomes for you or anyone else. So the idea of, well, if other people are suffering, then I have to suffer. I can't be happy because, or like we do comparative suffering. Whose suffering is worse? I should be so grateful. I have this and that. Like we diminish what is true for us. And again, that's just bringing some consciousness to that. Why am I diminishing my own struggles? Why am I diminishing what is true for me? Why do I think that suffering is somehow going to be rewarded? I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
Like just start to noodle on that rather than just criticize yourself or somehow, wrong yourself. That's a great starting point. It's an access point. Curiosity is the best access point for awareness, as long as the judgment piece stays far, far away.
Yeah.
That's a good start.
Well, it was what really helped me because I prepare for these shows and I was looking over the outline and I really caught myself in this cultivating self-awareness part that you talk about. And, going on and look at the thoughts, the beliefs, and the actions. And then the light bulb went on. And it was like, oh my gosh, Pat, when was your last B12 shot? Right?
Mm.
Because I know that, figuring out what to eat, especially now that you're back exercising. So I have B12. I give myself B12 shots. My naturopath is like, you got to take B12 shots. My nutritionist is like, you got to take B12 shots. And then I don't take them. And so it was interesting to find the cycle this weekend was to take a look at what can I do physically. But then we come to the part that you're the master at, and that is identifying and processing feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, who was it? My buddy, Don Miguel. I love Don Miguel. I've interviewed him a million times. And every time I interview him, I said, I'm still working on this one here. This one where you say the 4 agreements, this one number, what don't take anything personally, that one. I'm
That's so
working on that
hard.
one.
That's so hard.
Right? Right? Because to take it personally, you can see the power of that agreement, right? I mean, the others are not easy either, but I'm just saying, I pretty much be impeccable with your word. I've really come close to that one. But the don't take anything, Don Miguel, come on. Like anything personally, like really? Someone says they don't like your hair or
Oh, everything. And
I mean, I could go through the list today. Or like you own a network and you own a business, right? And you're working through, what the solutions are, where to go. We take losing a host very personally. And it's not even that. We know our intention is to bring excellent people through here, but most of them then rise up and then they move on. They get television gigs, they get this gig, they get jobs at centers and all of that. But it's like, oh, my heart hurts. How do we get around that identifying processing feelings? Because my mom used to say, I'm sorry, I got to say it. Can I say this and then you can correct me?
sure.
My mama used to say, girls, I got to tell you, she's from the South. She said, I'm going to tell you girls, I'm going to tell you a little bit about feelings. And it was at the time that feeling song came out, I think. I don't even know. But she used to look at us girls and she'd say, girls, feelings turn to fat. And what? And for years, we didn't know what she was saying because her Southern drawl was, we thought maybe she was saying like feelings are all that, right? And then later on, after my dad passed away, she was saying feelings turn to fat. And I said to her, Mom, why did you say that?
What did she say?
She said, I got to paraphrase because I don't have the power of her tongue. I mean, you had to hear her. But she said, look, when you hold on to a feeling and you hold on to it and you hold on to it and you hold on to it, before you know it, you're not holding on to it anymore. It's holding on to you. And she said, my mama, your grandmama used to say feelings turn to fat. And if you're from the South, it's not always a bad thing. But what she was saying is the idea of holding on to feelings and not letting them pass through with processing or understanding them, they turn into things we don't want, right? Now, you had to know that my stepmom cooked everything with fat. There was a Crisco can of everything that was ever fried that goes in that can that you use over. But what she was saying was, I had my first child at 12, your sister, my second child at 13. She said, could you imagine what my life would have been like if I'd have held on to all the grief and story behind that? I wouldn't have met your dad. I wouldn't have met you. And she would talk about that. And yet feelings can be healthy, can't they? So let's talk about feelings as healthy, when they healthy, and when they not healthy.
Exactly. Well, you're talking about holding the idea with how we process feelings is so vital, because feelings get such a bad rap in our society. We're not supposed to have them really. We're supposed to be good, fine, or okay, or busy. Like those are the kind of the level that that we're allowed to have. And if you do express yourself, like let's say you're a person that cries or gets angry or frustrated, you're supposed to keep that back, because we're trying to find a good socially acceptable way of expressing ourselves. But it's kind of just become very neutral. And what I find is that if you have a feeling and then you don't express it, it does block things up. You do get stressed out. And feelings, to me, I call it like holding water. You cannot hold water for very long in the same way. And if you think about how feelings are supposed to come and go, they're simply indicators of our internal compass. Like, did something happen that was frustrating? Oh, I'm frustrated. Did something happen that was sad? Oh, I'm feeling sad. It's like, oh, I'm working. Did something happen that was joyful and I feel joyful? Great. Like your internal compass is working when you have those feelings. But what happens is a lot of times we shut it down because I shouldn't feel this way. This is a scary feeling or a bad feeling. Or we so we do that, or we really limit ourselves. So we say, I'm mad. I'm just mad. But really, you're infuriated, you're overwhelmed, you're frustrated, you're rageful, whatever. Like, we need to find some better words to actually describe bad, sad, mad, busy, happy. Like, that's really limiting to the scope of what we feel. And sometimes if you really search, what do I actually feel? Am I more overwhelmed or frustrated? That's different than mad, right? And if I'm sad, am I feeling just heartbroken? Is it just heartbreaking, or is it more melancholy, or is it bittersweet? Is it that kind of sadness, or is it a feeling of exasperation? Like, I just don't know what to do now, right? And
Yeah.
so when you can put really tangible words to the feelings, it helps so much, because your body, it almost recognizes like that's how I feel. And I just want to give you a quick example of something.
Yeah, please, please.
So two things that recently happened. One, I was talking to my daughter and I said, Claire, why are you so angry right now? She was angry about something. She goes, Mom, I'm not angry. I'm frustrated. No, I'm jealous. That's what she said. And it was funny for the moment, because she's like, I'm not angry. I'm frustrated. No, actually jealous. And it was so interesting, because when she said jealous, I said, oh, talk to me about jealous. Instead of saying, you don't be jealous of your sister. Don't do this. Because sometimes when people say that, the first thing we say is, don't be that way. Don't do that. You shouldn't feel that way. And what that again does, it just diminishes the person, because we know how we feel. It's like someone saying, when you're upset, if someone says, oh, just calm down. Just calm down. You're overreacting. In the history of time, no one has said, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That really helps me reflect. I'll just calm down. You know what it does? It just amps people up, because don't you dare tell me how I feel. Right? Don't you tell me to calm down. Right? So we have that push pull of our feelings. And so when my daughter said that, that was a big deal. And then I was talking to a friend of mine and I said, I just feel sad about what happened. This was with a mutual friend of ours. And she said, it sounds like you're actually more disappointed. It's not how you thought it was going to be. And I'm like, oh, that's it. That's it. I'm actually disappointed. And then that helped me reframe. And then I could work through the feelings. And then but getting the word can be so helpful to letting your mind and body know, oh, that's how I feel, without judgment or criticism of I should or shouldn't feel this way, or I'm overreacting, or I'm being too emotional. All the things we tend, to say to people to minimize it. Because what happens is then we block the flow, and then we put it somewhere. And a lot of times we put our emotions right in our bodies. So when you feel like, oh, we can all, if you get,
that's what my mama was saying though.
Yeah,
that you just explained. I couldn't get it out what she was saying, but that is what she was saying when she said feelings are fat. You know what she was saying very scientifically, not knowing you. She was saying like, you know how you could eat some stuff and they just turn into fat, no matter what you do. But you're right. We now know that my mama was pretty smart. And like my grandmama, like with her outhouse and the whole potbelly stove, grandmama, what they were saying, it sticks to you. And after time, you become it. There's so much we learn. I want to talk to you about this when we come back, because it's the next part of what you do and what you're teaching us today. And it is when you identify those feelings, those processes, then how do we move beyond that? And how do we then take meaningful action? Because even like a B12 shot that I took like yesterday, woke up, got a great night's sleep, woke up this morning, and there are some other changes. But Kari's going to take us through, how do we go through those things? How do we hold things in our consciousness? How do we work through what most people might call a disappointment, might call a loss? And I got to tell you, I have done a show a couple times now, maybe not in this time spot, talking about my life a little bit.
Mhm.
And when I talk about it, I share about a little airplane story, like a being on a plane with, people. And they
Uh-huh.
always ask you, like, what do you do? Where are you from? And you start to talk. And I remember saying to one guy when he asked me a question, and I just said, yeah, I had a rough life, but I'm living great now. And he said, well, what's rough to you? And I remember out of my mouth was, well, I was born a little bit off. Some people call it spectrum. I cried for 2.5 years because nobody could figure it out back then. I was sent to Catholic boarding school at a very young age and got beat every night. My mom commits suicide when I'm there. I'm homeless at 17. And yeah, 19, I get arrested for something I didn't do. And I said, you know what? I'll tell you, I wouldn't trade any of that because I learned so much about it. I said, when you're homeless and you have to fend for yourself, boy, you learn a lot about responsibility. And I was like upbeat about it. And the guy looked at me and said, that story can't be true. Now I had to sit on the plane with this guy for 6 hours. Hello, hello. I looked to change my seat. And he said, and I looked at him, I said, what do you mean? He said, I've never met anybody that could talk about he counted 5 things like that in life and be smiling about it. Let's take a short break. When we come back, what does it take from feeling, processing anything you've gone through in these past 2.5 to 3 years now? What will Kari help us with to get from all of that, one, witnessing and acknowledging it, to maybe looking at it and looking for the blessings in it? And my heart goes out to you if you've lost someone. We all have, myself over the holiday. But when we come back, it's a new day. It's a new capital R for resilience. And Kari Knutson is in the house. We'll be right back. Kari Knutson, we're having so much fun. And yet this is one of the most powerful conversations we can have. In my preparation for today, I've already made some changes over the weekend. Because they're important to be reminded. As many tools as I have and as many people I'm in front of, Kari, I need to be in front of you and look at where your passion, purpose is and what you're doing to help people. And just by prepping for this show, I stopped 3 things and I started 3. And it was important for me to recognize that, right? One of them was straightening out my house. Okay, now I'm not Pigpen, but when I'm alone, I could tend to leave like clothes on the floor. Okay, true confessions. Okay. But when Linda comes, that doesn't happen. But before we go on, how do people find out about you? How do they work with you? You are a coach, fantastic coach. They can work with you on everything we're talking about today, and especially emotional intelligence. Halle Berry, thank you.
Right. Halle Berry, she'll be the new queen. Yeah, so you can find anything you want about me at knutsonspeaks.com. It's KNUTSON speaks.com. And I do presentations. That's a bulk of my work. Then I also do coaching for people who want to focus their work. Eventually, hopefully this spring or summer, I'll have my one-woman show again. And yeah, so everything I do though is about taking psychology, what I say, off the couch and bringing it to people in useful, tangible, applied ways with no psycho jargon, babble, anything that would be like, what's that theory? Or I don't understand that. I want it to be really accessible to people, because you don't have to necessarily go to see a therapist to benefit from psychology. And there's a lot of ways, if we shift our thinking, that can be very, very powerful. So that's my mission, to help bring psychology to the people.
Yeah. And we've been doing it in all of these shows. And that's why I said, when you go back and you listen to them, or you go back and you watch the shows, they're really fascinating and interesting. But there are things that feel right now so intense. Let's just take a moment. They feel so intense. COVID felt intense, right? Things felt intense. And I was listening to something or watching something, I can't remember which, and you can't help but your heart go out for the people in Ukraine.
Oh,
You just can't. And you can get involved. There are ways you can donate, right? There are things you can do. But there's a difference between that and taking it all in and becoming completely overwhelmed, right?
mm-hmm.
So tell me about this and what happens when we do take this in and we watch the devastation.
Sure. Well, we can think about what we just talked about. So when you think about, okay, I'm watching, let's say use the war in Ukraine, for example, that information is coming at us and we have access to it all day long, right? So then we have those triggers and those feelings because of it. Then the next idea is to say, okay, what kind of boundary am I putting on when I access that information? It doesn't mean those feelings aren't there. It means, how am I going to have a boundary about when and how I consume information that I can manage? And then you have the feelings that come up because of it, and you're not denying those or negating those or judging those. A lot of times too, we'll see someone else in a situation and we'll be like, oh my God, what if that was me? What would I do? What would I? And we like overly identify in that way, and it makes me personalize it so much, because we care, we have empathy for people. But sometimes what we also have to do is say, like, I even work with people when I say, I am safe right now. I am safe. I'm okay. Like, to know that, like, I'm not the person going through that, even though I can have empathy for someone else. We over personalize that, or we feel like we shouldn't, I can't be happy in my life because someone else is suffering. Right. And that is also a push pull when we think, I'm I am my own individual person, experience my life in this time and space. So in order to really do something with what I have to have really good boundaries and good emotional processing, so that I can go out in the world and do the third part, which is take action and take meaningful action. And the idea of, once I have some awareness around my thought processes, I know what I'm feeling and I can express it accurately. And I want to just add one thing with that. There's a lot of things you can look up, like Plunchnik wheel of emotion and emotion wheel and whatever. There's so many things out there. Brene Brown has a thing. There's other things that you can look up. So if you're looking for, well, I need some more words, there's plenty of things you can look at online. But once you identify those feelings, then the third part of the action piece is really important, because a lot of times we think, oh, I have to take action towards the thing that's upsetting me. For example, a lot of us say, all right, I want to donate money to people in Ukraine. And there's people getting Airbnbs and not going there, but sending money to people, like renting an Airbnb in the Ukraine and then not going just so the money gets there. There's people donating to organizations. There's so many things you can do to take action that way. Sometimes though, it's hard when we take action, feel like, now what?
Yeah.
Right? Like I did that and it's out somewhere that it's not tangible. So I also encourage thinking about taking action towards something meaningful in your own life. And I want to give a quick example of what this could look like, so it has some meaning for you. But I was feeling the devastation of the Ukraine, all the feelings of overwhelm and all of just this helplessness, frustration, sadness. Why we just almost got through 2 years of COVID as a world, and now this, like, come on, like, just feeling awful, and then seeing it, and it was all overwhelming. And I had this urge in me to take action. So of course I looked up and I donated, and I felt like, okay, I could do that. But then I was like, wait, I need to take action on something in my own life that I can actually control and see the outcome of.
Yeah.
And so I had this idea that one of my daughters is in 4th grade, and her teacher needed some reading books, like 10 copies of each. They wanted something. They were asking for parent donations. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make those books happen. And I called a bookstore and I'm like, how much was the total for all these books? And then I emailed all the parents and I said, I'm doing a 1-day donation drive to get these books. And then I'm going to go pick them up and I'm going to deliver them because some kids are going to have books. Because I thought to myself, I need to see something good in the world that I can manage and make happen. I'm going to take action because those aren't, I can't necessarily directly affect the kids in the Ukraine, but I can affect somebody's kids.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
There. So that action really emboldened me to feel like I had some control. And I think that's an element that a lot of us seek when we have these feelings of overwhelm, and we're having a hard time being resilient because it's hard to feel like, well, what do I actually have control over when the world's out of control?
I'm so glad you said that, because one of the cornerstones of building resilience is to recognize that we are not totally powerless. You see, powerless and helpless, they are the antithesis of resilience, right? And I don't mean situations where you are really, you and I, we talk about our buddy Viktor Frankl ad nauseum sometimes, because this is a man that really was powerless and helpless over his environment. But even so, he made the best of it. He wasn't powerless over his mind or his attitude. And that's what, he really focused on.
Well, and one of his best quotes was decisions, not conditions, right?
Exactly.
Path, decisions. And that's exactly decisions around what you can control, what you can't, how you're going to take meaningful action through engaging your conscious mind. Also, not negating how you feel. So then you're not stuck. When you identify how you feel, then you can move through that feeling on to the next one. Because again, it's really that idea of all these things working together. And we tend to get stuck in 1, 2, or 3. Like we get stuck somewhere and we can't, what I call like complete the cycle. And we're having very human responses to things every day. And the thing is, when we do this comparative, well, at least I'm not this, or at least I'm that, we lose the beauty of our own stories, because we've all gone through things that are beautiful and amazing and things that are horrible, hard, and awful. And those things make up who we are. And it's how the idea why I love resilience so much is you have the capacity to recover from those difficulties if you actively choose to engage your self-awareness, process your feeling, and then process feelings and then take action in a meaningful way that lets you know, I do have control over something. Decisions, not conditions, determine your path. And that is, to me, so powerful, so that wherever you are, whatever you're dealing with at whatever stage, there's hope. And the biggest thing we lose is hope. And that is the detriment to most of us, not the actual circumstances, but when we lose hope for what's possible, or our own efficacy, or in our ability to think, do I have the capacity to build resilience? Yes, you do.
It's interesting you're talking about that. I was talking to a friend of mine over the weekend, and we were just chit-chatting about, pop culture, movies, kids. She wants me to talk to her children because she says, you relate to them, like you relate to the Marvel universe. I don't. Can you talk to my kids? And I said, okay, like, are we talking about comic books, or do you want me to talk about like what? What do you want me to talk about? But we were chit-chatting a little bit, and I was struck by a name that keeps coming up in Hollywood. And I asked myself, why? When somebody is so revered for their integrity and their humility and their talent, and it comes up as sidebars and other conversations, you really stop. And Scarlett Johansson was talking about the fact that she wasn't the first candidate for Black Widow. And she went on to talk about how unworthy she felt, implying that the woman that was first selected was so outstanding, right? So, right, she had to really step into her talent. She knew she wasn't first choice. She didn't know if she'd be good enough at that. But the name that comes up that we don't hear about, we don't see her out there doing big speeches, but her name in the industry is said over and over. And I love working with her. She helped me enormously. Emily Blunt. And when you hear it over and over, whether it's The Rock says it, or Scarlett Johansson says it, or somebody else said it in one of the awards, you have to ask yourself, what is she made of? Right? You know, because when we hear about Hollywood, how often do we really hear people raise other people up? And I think in this context, we have to remember to raise ourselves up, and it's okay to raise others up around us. I need to
Oh,
get back to what you said. Just because I raise Kari up, it doesn't mean that I'm making a comparison. We can raise each other up. We can raise ourselves up. That is critical to resilience, in my opinion. I don't know. What's your thought?
no, I love that idea, because the idea of raising people up becomes, though, from a sense of worthiness. Like, and that is a huge thing. Well, two things: belief in ourselves and what's possible, and then worthiness. And even saying, I am worthy. I am worthy of figuring this out. I am worthy of compassion for how I am in this place right now. I'm worthy of love. I am worthy of some vulnerability to ask for help or get what I need. And also, when you're in a place you can help, it's so interesting to remember those times when people lifted you up, to feel like, look at, like, I'm in a place now where I can. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes in my life, when when I'm called to step into a situation or to do something, I always think, I'm so grateful. And I say this to my husband, like, I'm so grateful that I have the foundation at home that allows me to step up in this way, because I'm not
Mm,
um just barely keeping it together. They're trying to do everything. Like, I have a sense of who I am and where I come from. And I think about my parents and what they gave me. And, but my tangible things in my life now too, to be like, I'm worthy of all this good things.
mm.
And I want to then take what I have and then share and give and lift up to others and help them build their own resilience in whatever way I can. And that's the part around taking action for the things you can control, right? I can help. I often think about this. One time, so my mom and dad used to play in different nursing homes. My dad's a pianist and my mom wanted to be a singer. She tried. And I said, does it ever make you miss your own parents when you go there? Do you miss, because, they're not here in Colorado, they're in Wisconsin and Ohio. And my dad says, well, that's someone's parent. That's someone's parent right there. Like, I miss my parents, but I'm serving someone else's parent right there.
Mm.
And that's like when I thought about, I can't help all the kids in the Ukraine right now, but I can help these kids, right? And I can't help everybody, but can I help this person? And I can't show up every day ready to engage, but I can show up today. So I might as well do it 100%, because I can do it. So I should in this moment, right? And that's taking the opportunity to really step in to what's possible for us, recognizing that it doesn't have to be perfect to be really, really good. And you don't have to be perfect to be good. And also the idea of, you better be fine, good, happy, okay, or busy. And if you have anything else, something's wrong with you. I'd rather say, like, look at how complex you are. Look at all the things you can feel and process in a day, and look at in the scope of your life. Like you were saying, Dr. Pat, something that's tragic in this moment, you can actually laugh about over here with time, distance, perspective, safety, processing, understanding. You can say, yep, that's my life. And it's okay. And I don't need to embellish it or dramatize it, just what is. And I'm okay. And
Yeah.
here's how I got there. Right. So I think your story is beautiful in a way too, because you can see the journey part of it.
Yeah. And I love it. I mean, you think about this. I have a friend that got so infatuated in love with Julia Childs, right? The chef, who brought a whole new perspective. And I said to her one day, a bunch of years ago, I said to her, because the movie had just come out, and I had said, tell me about Julia, because both of us would watch the television show, just wouldn't miss any of it. And back then you couldn't do on demand, right?
Uh-huh.
And I said, what was it for you about her? And here's what we both agreed. She said, to look at her, you wouldn't know she was a phenomenal chef, because she came across as a regular woman in the kitchen, picking up the chicken by its butt and yeah, I mean, right?
Right.
And she said she was relatable. She really, touched all of us that are here in the kitchens every day doing what we do, but begged us to step forward because we had the capacity to do more. And I think that's part of what we're talking about today for ourselves, like you're doing for the kids,
Mhm.
whether it's being there for them, which is, by the way, equally important. Because,
Mhm.
see, we don't think kids are paying attention to the news. They are, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God.
Definitely. And finding a way to help them. But you, again, this idea of suffering, you can't help other people when you're suffering. It's hard to
No,
show up for other people when you're suffering. It's
no.
hard to feel good when you're suffering, or even have the capacity to build resilience when you're suffering. And so, this whole idea of take caring of yourself, think about you as the focal point of how can I be thinking consciously about what's going on with me? How can I set some good boundaries and some space and good self-care, bring up my worthiness? How can I name what's going on for me without judgment, criticism, or comparison? And then how can I go out and take action towards things that matter in my life, in the world, with other people, and bringing people up? And that, again, to me, is what you're saying is the cycle of how we get through life, right? And if we want to do it in a way that builds our resiliency, it's being conscious of that cycle and being conscious of those things. Cause like even you said, I know I should do this, but I don't, because we get busy, we get overwhelmed, we
Yeah.
get tired, right? All of us. And I talk about this stuff all the time, and I'm constantly thinking, let's look at this part of my life, or what's going on here now, or am I dealing with something that's hard, that my emotions are stagnant, and do I need to find a way to process them so I can do the next thing? What it's a constant analysis. And I call it, you're always arriving. And sometimes you look so far into the future that, oh, I haven't arrived yet, that you very rarely look back and say, like, holy cow, look how far I've come.
Yeah. I
Look
just
what
had a moment like
I've
that.
achieved.
Yeah, I had a moment like that. I also had the moment where I recognized that there's really a whole frontier in in short term of a lot of things to do, but we don't take time to look back. We don't take time to acknowledge.
Mhm.
You know, once upon a time I said, get yourself a bragging buddy. Get somebody that you talk to every day, and both of y'all get on a phone, and for 90 seconds straight, you got to brag about yourself, and then they brag about themselves. And it sounds easy, right? It's
Theory. I
not
mean, it's
that
making me like
easy.
think about what would you say?
90 seconds. At first I gave them like, I had 5 minutes, and they were like, no bleeping way. Then I went to 3 minutes. Then I cut it back to 90 seconds. This is what I do with my coaching clients, right? But I wish everybody would try that today, because it is resilient building. Brag on yourself. It doesn't matter what you brag on, right?
No, and it helps you see what you've done. Like, I think part of building resilience is, oh, look what I've done in the past. Look what I've overcome. It helps you feel that strength. It helps you feel like, oh, look what I did, especially in times when you didn't think you would overcome it. But if you do take the time to look back a bit and say,
Uh-huh.
what did I have that allowed me to
Yeah.
get through that? What person got me to here today, right? And that idea of, you can call it bragging, you can call it telling the truth, you can just call it being in a society that wants to diminish that, just being bold enough to say, I'm proud of myself for this. I'm doing enough. I'm enough. This is enough. Or I'm proud of this regardless of if anyone's applauding you or not, right? Sometimes I feel like, why don't I have a parade or a hot air balloon, or like topic? Like, what is it? But there's a lot of things that if you look in your life, like, I'm proud, and it's enough that it's in here. It's enough.
And you know what? Ain't nothing stopping you and me from buying our own balloons. Hello, right there. Kari, let's give out your website. Thank you so much for today. And then any last words for folks, please.
Sure. You can find me at knutsonspeaks.com, or on any social media at Knutson Speaks. And I'm putting up some new exciting training programs and speaking things. So I'm getting all started with that, which is exciting. And I feel like all of my topics have expanded from emotional intelligence to now 20 different topics, because people have said, can you talk about this? How does it relate to this? Let's go deeper with this. So I'm doing a lot of compassion, fatigue, burnout, and stress, and connecting that to resiliency and thriving through change, a lot of change management, and then how do we build high performing teams? So a lot of fun, exciting things in the works that I'm doing. And my closing message for today is, a lot of times when we feel overwhelmed, then we just kind of feel overwhelmed and keep that. Sometimes it's good if you can take a step back and be like, I am overwhelmed about this situation. This thing feels scary. And at the same time, I do have control over this, this, and this. And I'm going to take care of myself today in this way because my suffering does not lead to better outcomes. And two things can be true at once. Like I can take action to something that's out there, and I can take action something here, and they're both meaningful. Right. And so thinking about those things and holding all these things at once is great, because when you make big things like I am overwhelmed, it's easier to say like I feel overwhelmed in this moment, or this situation is overwhelming me. But you don't have to take in, like you said, you don't have to like
Yeah.
own those emotions. They're supposed to flow through you. So let them flow, and look up some feeling words and see if you can get really descriptive and exact in how you feel. So the next time you say like, oh, I'm just kind of mad, I'd love it if you could find a perfect word that describes exactly how you're feeling, or a combination if you wish. That's
I
my
love it. I love it. Kari, thank you so much for today. And I just want to leave everybody with this. You too can have a pet cockroach that you call the thing. It's really okay. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back.
You have been listening to Get Big Out Loud Radio, where we explore the complex, funny, and beautiful ride of life with me, Kari Knutson, joining Dr. Pat live every second Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific on transformationtalkradio.com. I will help you to know which thoughts are keeping you small in order for you to get big. Get big and live your life out loud. For more information, visit KnutsonSpeaks.com.